Hello, my name is Kitty Boone. I work with the Aspen Ideas Festival. I'm based here in Aspen, Colorado, and it is my pleasure today to introduce you to this session. I heard this morning that 70% of Americans now feel that climate change is a serious problem, and yet many of them still don't know what kind of solutions we can bring to bear to solve it or to begin to manage it. So to that end, I'm really delighted to introduce you two discussants who are going to have a conversation about the future of electrification. Ken Chenault, former head of American Express, now the general partner and founder of General Catalyst, and who has also just started an important initiative we'll talk about tomorrow on Ideas Festival Virtual, 110, is going to be in conversation now with the CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra, who has taken a very serious stance on electrification and bringing GM and the rest of the auto industry into a more climate tolerant future. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Kitty. So let me begin the conversation. Certainly, as Kitty said, with 70% of Americans recognizing that we have to do something about climate change. The key issue is, what are businesses doing? Are they doing their part? And how are they addressing it? And Mary, you've recently revealed a number of goals for General Motors when it comes to addressing climate change. And let me ask sort of a broad question is, talk more about what you're doing and, very importantly, why.
Well, at General Motors, we've created a vision where we want to create a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And earlier this year, we did announce two very important and bold goals around zero emission. First, that we plan to be carbon neutral in our global products and operations by 2040, and that we also aspire to eliminate tailpipe emissions from new light-duty vehicles by 2035 in the US. And when we look at these future-focused targets and really are using them to put a stake in the ground, we feel it's really important also that we focus on how we help deliver a future with zero emissions. And when we look at it, first, we want to be based in science. And so from a GM perspective, we have approved science-based targets that align with the most ambitious goals of the Paris Agreement. And we are signatory of the Business Ambition Pledge for 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we must also focus on taking equitable climate action. And that means we need to make sure that we're bringing along all of our stakeholders, our employees, our customers, and our communities, as well as our suppliers and dealers. And we need to ensure that we have equity in the solutions that we had developed to address climate change. And when I look at it, for General Motors, it's something that I think we can do extremely well, because today we offer a wide variety of products, of vehicles for different price points, different uses. And so as we transition to an all-electric world, we will do the same thing and make sure we have electric vehicles that are affordable, that have different functionality, as well as have electric vehicle ride sharing with Cruise. And then also to support communities in the way goods are delivered with our Bright Drop products, and then also using our Hydrotec fuel cells. So, we really think we have to have broad solutions to fit all of the ways goods or people move to really address climate change. And then we also need to make sure that there's robust charging infrastructure. And we need to, not only support those who can put a charger in their garage, but it has to be across all stakeholders, for people who live in apartments who may not even have assigned parking. And so we really need to look at this in a very holistic approach. And that's how we're looking at it. And the key to electric vehicles is battery costs. So we're making sure that we're also investing and focusing on how do we get the energy density up and the battery costs down so we can have a variety of solutions that serve everyone.
That's terrific. As I think about some of the broader implications, and you've mentioned this, Mary, in some of your remarks, is you've said that GM will drive an equitable an inclusive transition? And how are you going to do that?
Well, I really think it means that we have to look at every community, because climate change does not impact every community in the same way. And so we have to implement solutions that make sure we don't leave someone behind or further the divide. And one, I think it starts with our own workforce, and we need to make sure that as we transition and the work changes, that we are taking our employees along with us on this journey. And I'm very proud that we're doing that today. We already have plants that are building electric vehicles, and we're in the middle of training people for our second and third plant that will be building electric vehicles, as well as the components necessary. And then I think more broadly, working in the company to make sure that we have a pipeline of diverse talent for the future, and working with organizations, and we're so proud to be a part of 110. I think, another very important thing is what I talked about a bit before, and it's making sure everybody has access to EVs. Those who buy new vehicles across a wide range of price points, those who will benefit from autonomous ride sharing with Cruise, because when you take ride sharing today, it's about $2.50 to $3 a mile. If you can get the cost down to under $1 a mile, you start to open it up for a lot more people. And then it's also looking at how do we move goods. So it's broadly looking at making sure everybody has access, and then also talking about, as I said, infrastructure. And I know that's going to be an important part, and we support, and I know Secretary Buttigieg was also a part of the festival and talking about the infrastructure bill, which is so important to make sure all communities can participate. And then finally, the fourth pillar is climate equity, and we want to help support the front lines and supporting grassroots and community organizations that are working to close the gaps. And that's why we've created a new $25 million Equitable Climate Action Fund, which complements our $35 billion investment in electric and autonomous vehicles, and I think will really advance across all fronts.
That's very exciting. Let me just ask you just a basic question that I'm sure you get asked a lot is, how do we get people excited about electric vehicles and that they buy them? And to do that, how are you creating consumer demand among consumers so that they prioritize sustainability or likely believe in climate change? Because you know better than most, because you deal with it every day, this can be a very polarizing issue. So how do you deal with that? I mean, it's one thing creating client demand, but how do you deal with the politics of sustainability? And you obviously want to drive this based on the facts.
Well, I think this is such an important question, Ken. And to me, when I look at it, as we begin to transform the company to providing EVs across a wide variety of segments and brands, I really want to make sure customers choose electric vehicles because they provide an overall better customer experience, and they never feel like they're giving anything up. And we've spent a lot of time understanding what the customer thinks about electric vehicles. And they want a beautiful vehicle. Two, they want a vehicle that has the right range. And once we get over 300 miles of range, they lose range anxiety. And then they need to make sure we address what I call charge anxiety, that, again, to really get EV adoption, it's not just having people buy EVs as their second or third or whatever vehicle. We need people to choose an electric vehicle that's their only vehicle. So it has to be that vehicle they drive back and forth to work every day, they drive their family around, but also they need to have confidence that when they need to go over 300 miles, there's going to be a robust charging infrastructure. And that's why we're working and investing. And we believe the charging solution will be at home, at work, and then when people are on the go. And I think there's been great progress in that already. And we have found through our customer research that when we check all those boxes, customers say, I'm very interested in an electric vehicle. And so that's what we're working on. And that's why it's all about affordability. And, we're super excited that, this fall we'll be launching our first vehicle off of the Ultium platform that we have, which is the GMC Hummer EV. And that's just one of many that we'll start to roll out to provide EVs for everyone.
That's great. Could you expand a little bit? You talked about this on what the shift to electric vehicle means for your workforce. How are you bringing your workforce along? Because this is one of the biggest transformations that your industry is going through. And Mary, you've been a leader in this. So how have you talked to your workforce? How are you training them? And how have you painted the future for them?
Well, and this is so important because in order for everyone in the company to believe in our mission to create a world with zero emissions, they have to see themselves being a part of our future. And whether they're an engineer or they're working as one of our team members in our assembly plants, they need to know they're part of this future. And so we're working and providing training. And the other thing is, this won't be the light switch turning overnight. This will happen over a series of time where we can, in some cases, retrain employees that were maybe more focused on internal combustion engine and systems associated with internal combustion engine vehicles, or whether it's our employees where they weren't building electric vehicles. And we've established training and educational programs within. We have GM Manufacturing University, and we have our GM Automotive Manufacturing Electoral College. And so that really starts to make sure people have the opportunity to be retrained, be part of the team. And as I mentioned, we've already done this at our Orion assembly plant, and we're now right in the middle of converting our plant in Detroit-Hamtramck that is just a few miles away from our headquarters that we've renamed Factory Zero. And also retraining is going on there. And as I go, whether I'm talking to employees in our offices or in our manufacturing facilities, they ask the question of, how do I fit in? And our goal is to make sure that as we make this transition, we bring everyone along. And that's why we're working so hard to make sure we delight and provide customers a better experience, because that gives us the volume to create the jobs, and we know how to retrain. And by the way, our manufacturing workforce, to me, is a competitive advantage, because we already have the people who know how to build a vehicle with high quality, to do it safely. And I'm very proud of the fact that in our manufacturing operations, we have many, many very good, well-paid jobs. So I think this is a huge opportunity, and I'm very confident that we can move forward and train as we go and be very successful my hope is not only maintaining our workforce, but growing our workforce.
Terrific. I think people in the audience would be, very interested, given that you came out early for electric vehicles. Talk a little bit about your own personal journey and your team's journey, obviously, in arriving at that point. How did you go about it? How did you think about really stepping out very early to lead this?
Well, when I look at General Motors, we've been working on electric vehicles for more than 2 decades. And so as we really looked at climate change and, looked at the science, we knew we needed to take action, and we knew we had a big role to play. But we also had the experience and the learnings from whether it was the Chevrolet Volt or the Chevrolet Bolt. We learned a lot with those vehicles. And that's why, 3 or 4 years ago, we said, in order to really transition, we need to have an EV platform. And we started developing the Ultium platform, which I mentioned, we start rolling into the public market later this year. And that really opened up, because we had already done the learning of, if you retrofit a vehicle without a dedicated architecture, you can't move as fast. And we have found our experience with what we've developed with the Ultium platform, we could actually reduce our development time and get vehicles out on the road faster. And we also, the flexibility of our platform allows us to do, I'll say, a compact SUV all the way to a super truck like the Hummer. So, it was recognizing where the world was going, kind of looking over the horizon, and then getting all the pieces in place to be ready to move fast. And that's why, as we see customers being much more open to electric vehicles, we're well positioned to meet that demand across several segments.
Well, I think what's really impressive is that you came out early, and I certainly understand the 2 decades that you worked that through. But you and your team, what it seems to me is the forces are clearly moving in your direction, that there'll be a strong adoption of EVs, and we certainly hope that's going to happen.
Yes.
Could you just talk a little bit about where GM is going next? Talk a little bit about how you think about the future, first for the industry overall, and then for GM.
Well, I think, over the last short amount of time, we've seen many other companies start to make commitments as it relates to EVs and introduce their first or, announce that they will have electric vehicles. I think it's very important that happens across the entire industry. But I also think for our industry, this is an opportunity for us to rethink so many elements of the way we make vehicles. And one of the things we've done at General Motors is we've looked at what should we be doing? What are the critical components in the areas where we can really do the research and have the best products? And that's why we invest so much into battery development technology, also working closely with LG Energy Solution, who's been a great partner for us for more than a decade. But making the investments in this country, I'm very proud of the fact that we've announced that we've already announced 4 battery cell plants that will be in the United States. And in the past, most of this work was done outside of the US. And so this, allows us to grow jobs. And also very important, there's a fear that with electric vehicles, they take less parts. And so therefore, there's going to be a loss of jobs. But not if we bring more work to the country to support the overall build. And so I think that's something that's very important. But then, how it's changed GM, once we put our goal out that we aspire to have all of our light duty vehicles sold via electric vehicles, that was a huge stake in the ground with our employees, because it changed the dialogue of, when and if and how fast to. We know when, so we know how fast, and we've got to go now. And it was amazing of getting everyone aligned, but I can tell you it was something where our employees felt so proud to be a part of it. So I couldn't be more excited about where we're headed from our EV future, our autonomous future, and then, beyond, because the other area where our industry is changing is really the vehicle is a software platform. And we have, again, decades of experience with OnStar, and we're growing that into other areas of business, with whether it's insurance or our Super Cruise technology, which is level 2 autonomous driving. So there are just so many technologies we can deliver to make the customer safer, give them a better experience, all while doing the right thing for our planet.
That's great. That's fantastic. Mary, could you just talk a little bit about the regulatory environment and how you feel about it, particularly with respect to EVs, but also what could enhance the adoption of EVs?
Sure. Well, first, one of the things that General Motors has been working on for several years now is having a national zero emission vehicle program, as opposed to a regulatory patchwork of state by state. And, we're very encouraged in discussing this with the Biden administration, and we see an opportunity there because when you don't have clarity from what the regulatory environment's going to be, it drives inefficiency, which I think, makes the transition not as fast. So I'm incredibly encouraged of how the Biden administration is moving forward and looking at EVs as a solution, but recognizing companies are in different places. So how do we move and then get to a point that in the latter part of the decade, we're all on the same path and moving quickly. So that's one area. And, but the other then is this infrastructure issue. We can't underestimate, because to get this EV adoption, you have to get people who only spend between $30,000 and $35,000 on a new vehicle, or never buy a new vehicle, always buy a used vehicle. And how do we have a robust used EV market as well? But the charging infrastructure is key. Yeah. And that's why, from an equitable perspective, we really need to make sure we're looking and understanding every community and what it's going to take to make adoption something that a person really believes they can do. So, but again, I think there's a huge opportunity, and with the work that's happening right now related to infrastructure, I see a path that, frankly, I think will be historic.
Well, that's very, very encouraging. Could you talk just a little bit more as you think about segments of the workforce and communities, certainly across this country? How confident are you that GM, in its strategy, can answer some of the needs of some segments of the community who right now are behind, others that may be left behind over time? And then we all are focused on the regeneration of our communities across the country. How do you think about that and GM's role? And you've talked about that, but it'd be good to drill down a little bit more on it.
Sure. Well, and I've talked a lot about having, EVs for everyone, or used car or EV ride sharing. But to me, and this is one of the three pillars of General Motors corporate giving and our commitment, and frankly, my personal commitment, is education. And making sure that everyone has access to a great education. STEM, there's not an industry, you and I both know, there's not an industry around the globe that isn't being impacted by technology. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be coding, but people need to have a technical basis for whatever area they go in. And that's why education, STEM education, is so important. And that's what we work to champion, working with organizations like Girls Who Code, Black Girls Code, and also supporting the teachers across the country to make sure they have the tools to make sure this next workforce is ready. Because, we know that the days of you graduate from high school or, some secondary education and then head to work, it's not going to be that job for 30 years. So we also have to create this learning environment. And so General Motors is committed not only to learning on the job and as we go and as we transform, but also making sure that next generation has an equal opportunity, whether it's 110 or also, through Business Roundtable, multiple pathways. Sure. Where it's really about what the person knows, not necessarily credentials. And we think that is going to go a long way to really improving the representation and the diversity and the inclusiveness of the workforce of the future.
That's terrific. Could you talk about, if you look back over your tenure, what have been some of the steps that you've taken with the workforce at GM that you think has really prepared them to deal with the transformation, not just with EV, but transformation that you're leading across the company?
Well, we really want to create a company where people feel that they can bring their true self to work, be their best self, and do their best work, and feel valued for it. And so that's what we talk about when we want to be the most inclusive company in the world. Although I'm always quick to say, and that's not a title we want to hold on our own. We want
Right.
everyone, every company, every organization, every institution to create that environment, because I think that's a world we all want to live in. And having conversations with our employees so they understand that, talking and providing bias training so people realize, that we need to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, understand their challenges, understand their perspective, and understand and accept differences. And so, we've been on this journey for a while, and really proud of all of the firsts that General Motors has had for literally decades. But, we recognize we have so much more to do, and, having the conversation, because listening leads to awareness and leads to understanding, which can lead to change and then action. And I'm so proud of the team at General Motors and how they're leaning in and sometimes having uncomfortable conversations to learn and create the environment we all want to, create for all of us at work.
Yeah, I think one of the things that clearly it seems you've been able to do at General Motors is getting the leaders to understand they have a personal accountability. And the culture change that you've been able to bring about has really been impressive. Talk a little bit, Mary. We only have a few minutes left, but I think people would love to hear, as you think broadly, and you think about business in the United States, what are the reasons why you're optimistic, and what might be one or two concerns you have?
Well, when people talk about, are you a person whose glass is half full or half empty? I always say mine's 3/4 full. And maybe it's because I have an engineering degree as a background. I believe that, working together, we can solve any problem.
Right.
And so I'm optimistic. And when I look across, corporate America or global industry, I see so many companies doing great things and leaning in and supporting their communities, supporting their employees, looking at how can they do more when you think about, looking at all stakeholders. And, there's been so much debate of, is that the right thing to do? And I'm like, to me, I was kind of like, if you don't look at all and make sure you understand the impact to all your stakeholders, it's going to have a long-term impact. So doing the right thing across your stakeholder base, I think, is going to be doing the right thing for your shareholders. So I'm incredibly optimistic and so impressed with what's happening in corporate America.
Well, that's great. Well, let me just say, Mary, that we feel really terrific about what you and your colleagues are doing at GM. And we're going to bet on you.
Well, Ken, thank you so much. And if you're really betting on the GM team, because I merely represent the wonderful and hardworking people of GM. So thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you.